They said the ocean was safe, until the morning it chewed us up and spat us out. No one saw the danger coming, least of all Tom, and certainly not our Pitbull, Daisy. What happened next was the last thing anyone expected. The Carter family always arrived early. Even in their 50s, Helen and George couldn't stand the midday crowds or the shrieking kids. Their son, Tom, was the only one still wild enough to surf before breakfast. The beach was a Carter tradition, a place to pretend nothing was broken back home. Daisy, their Pitbull, was already digging a hole near the umbrellas, flinging sand at Helen's new sandals. Helen tried to scold her, but Daisy's big yellow eyes had a way of bulldozing through rules and resentments. Maybe that's why Tom loved her most. Tom, grown man, 2 kids, but still a boy when the waves called. Helen watched as Tom zipped up his wetsuit. There was something she wanted to say, something about last night's argument, but she swallowed it. Pride tastes like metal, hard and bitter. Hey ma, look. Tom grinned, already wading in, board under one arm. Helen waved. George grunted, eyes hidden behind cheap sunglasses. Helen wondered if he was thinking about the mortgage, or about their daughter Sam, who'd skipped the trip again, blaming work but really just avoiding all of them. There's always a moment, right before disaster, when everything feels too calm. The sky was syrup blue, the air soft as a lullaby. Daisy, sensing Helen's anxiety, plopped her massive head on Helen's lap, breathing warm dog breath. For a moment Helen relaxed. A scream shattered the morning. Not a child, not playful, a man's scream. Tom's scream. Helen jerked up, heart hammering so hard it drowned out everything but instinct. She saw Tom flailing, the water boiling white and red around him. A shadow, massive, dark, moving with terrifying purpose. Shark! Someone shouted. Everything else was noise. George was on his feet, uselessly yelling. Lifeguards scrambled. But it was Daisy who moved first. Like some forgotten weapon, she launched into the surf, powerful legs pounding, ears flat, muscles rippling with raw intent. Helen felt frozen, watching her son and her dog disappear into chaos. The ocean, usually a mother's comfort, now looked like a monstrous mouth. And then, something you'd only see in those viral videos or late-night news. Daisy barreled straight into the foam, teeth bared, barking like hell itself. The shark twisted, momentarily distracted, just long enough for Tom to wrench free, blood inking the water. Helen's scream joined Tom's. George waded in, useless against the waves. Lifeguards followed, but Daisy was the only one near enough. Snapping, snarling, biting at a force of nature that didn't care about family or dogs or summer plans. By the time they hauled Tom out, Daisy was still circling, barking at the empty water. Tom's leg was mangled, but he was alive. Helen crumpled to the sand. Sobbing, Daisy pressed against her like a living shield. The world spun and the crowd gathered, all eyes wide. But even as the adrenaline faded, Helen sensed that something deeper had shifted. Survival has a price. And the Carters' wounds, old hidden, were about to surface, just as bloody and real as Tom's leg. If you think a family comes together after a brush with death, think again. Old wounds bleed the longest, and the Carter house was about to learn how deep the cuts really went. The hospital was a mausoleum of cheerful colors and fake plants. Tom's leg was stitched and wrapped, the doctors praising miraculous luck, and the dog's quick reaction. Helen nodded through it all, her mind a tangle of guilt and gratitude, fear and strangely resentment. She sat by Tom's bed, staring at his ashen face, the bruised flesh peeking from under layers of gauze. George stood awkwardly by the window, arms crossed so tight it looked painful. "Tell me again how it happened?" George asked, as if Tom might change the story, make it easier to digest. Tom tried to joke. "Just a little misunderstanding between me and the local wildlife, Dad." But his laugh was brittle, and Helen saw it, the terror simmering under his sarcasm. She wanted to hold him like when he was small and feverish, but all she could do was smooth the blanket and fuss with his pillow. The nurse came and went, always chipper, always busy. She brought Daisy. Somehow the rules didn't apply today. Daisy leaped onto the bed, nose to Tom's cheek, whimpering. The dog was a hero, they all said. Local news had already left a card. But Helen could see it. Tom's hands shaking as he stroked Daisy's head. The hero dog didn't stop his nightmares. George cleared his throat. You're lucky, son. Real lucky. Helen flinched at the word luck. As if their family ever had any. As if surviving a shark bite erased all the years of silent dinners, Sam's empty chair, Tom's divorce, George's endless side jobs to keep the roof from caving in. Daisy whined, sensing the tension. Outside, the hospital TV in the hallway replayed the story. Brave Pitbull saves local surfer from shark attack. Family bonds forever changed. Helen almost laughed. Changed, yes. Fixed? Don't kid yourself. Sam arrived at dusk, late as always, hair wild from the wind. She hovered in the doorway, eyes scanning for evidence that she was needed, or would be blamed. Helen's voice cracked. He's going to be fine, the doctor says. It's a miracle. Sam hugged Tom awkwardly, avoiding his bandaged leg. Heard Daisy made the 6 o'clock news, she said, mustering a grin. George, already tense, barked. You could have called, you know. Or shown up on time. Sam's mouth tightened. Some of us have jobs, Dad. Not all of us can drop everything for a family photo op. Helen winced, ready for the next explosion. But Tom, always the peacemaker, even with teeth marks in his calf, broke the silence. She's here, Dad. That's what counts. If only that were true. Helen watched her family, her grown children, her husband, her wounded son, her anxious dog, and felt a strange ache. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was the years of unspoken words clawing their way out. The nurse brought dinner. No one ate. The hospital soup congealed. A sad metaphor for every family meal they botched over the years. Tom drifted off to sleep, Daisy curled at his feet. Sam slipped out to make a call. George muttered about paperwork, and Helen was left alone with her thoughts, and the blaring silence. She wondered, not for the first time, if the real danger wasn't lurking in the waves, but sitting right here, wrapped in family ties and old regrets. One thing was certain, the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Sometimes it takes a disaster to rip the masks off. But what happens when what's exposed is uglier than anyone imagined? Tonight, every Carter will face the truth about the bonds they pretend to honor. Helen barely slept. Hospitals at night are louder than any storm. Beeping machines, squeaky carts, the occasional shout that chills your blood. She stared at the ceiling tiles and counted the cracks, trying to will her mind somewhere else, anywhere but here. By morning, Tom was awake, gray and worn. Sam was curled in a chair by the window, face ghostly in the pale light. George gone. Probably at the nurse's desk, demanding coffee or answers. The hospital social worker appeared, bright-eyed and too perky for this family. Just checking in. How are we doing? Helen's smile was all teeth. Well, one of us got bitten by a shark, and the rest of us are just snapping at each other. The social worker, unfazed, handed over a pamphlet about trauma counseling. Family events like this can resurface old conflicts. It's normal. Normal? Helen wanted to scoff. In the Carter family, drama was the only thing that ever felt normal. Daisy, dozing at Tom's side, lifted her head when George marched in, waving a sheaf of paperwork. They want to know who's paying for what. Insurance only covers so much. And there's a form for the dog, believe it or not. Sam rolled her eyes. Maybe Daisy can get her own GoFundMe. Helen tried to keep her voice even, but years of stress sharpened her words. Maybe if you'd been around more, George, we wouldn't be in this mess. Tom sighed, louder than necessary. Can we not do this now? George bristled. What? Speak the truth for once. Sam cut in, voice cold. You mean your truth, Dad. Not everyone's. Suddenly, every resentment, every slight and silent judgment, was floating in the sterile air. Helen couldn't take it anymore. All I ever wanted was for us to hold together. But we can't go a single day without falling apart. Tom almost died, and all we can do is pick old wounds. For a moment even Daisy went still. The silence was a verdict. George looked down, face red. I'm scared, Helen. I almost lost my son, and I don't know what to do with that. I can't fix it. Helen's anger softened just a crack. Sam's eyes filled with tears she'd never admit to. Tom managed a weak smile. You know what's worse than a shark? Family therapy. That broke the tension a little. They all laughed, thin and ragged but real. But as the laughter faded, Helen saw the truth. Love alone didn't heal everything. And survival, like forgiveness, was something you had to choose over and over. The doctors returned, discussing the long road ahead. Surgeries, bills, therapy. Daisy, officially a canine hero, was cleared to stay, her wagging tail a rare source of comfort. But when the news crew returned, bright lights, intrusive questions, Helen found herself pushed to the edge. Was it courage or instinct? They asked, shoving a microphone at her. Did you know your son was in danger? Helen's voice was low but steady. I always knew the real danger was letting our fears keep us silent. Daisy just reminded us what fighting for family looks like. That night, Helen stood at Tom's bedside, holding his hand while Daisy snored at their feet. She realized something had shifted. Maybe they'd never be perfect. Maybe the Carters were just good at surviving, each in their own flawed, stubborn way. But she wasn't ready to give up. Not on Tom. Not on Daisy. And for the first time in years, not on George or Sam either. You think you know who your family is, until a single question detonates years of buried secrets. Tonight, in a hospital room thick with blame and regret, the truth is finally coming for the Carters. Night in the hospital was a gauntlet. Endless rounds by nurses, Tom's half-awake groans, Daisy's anxious pacing. Helen pretended to nap, but every sound kept her strung tight. Sometime after midnight, she caught George whispering on the phone in the hallway. Too low for words but sharp enough for suspicion. Sam, meanwhile, kept vanishing for work calls that left her even more brittle. By morning, Helen's patience had splintered. She snapped at the nurse, at the doctor, even at Daisy, who yelped and sulked under the bed. Guilt gnawed at Helen's chest, but exhaustion had made her skinless. Breakfast was untouched on Tom's tray, cold eggs staring up like an accusation. Sam arrived late, eyes ringed dark. She stared at her brother, then at George, and finally at Helen. We need to talk, Sam said. George bristled. Not now. Yes, now, Sam shot back. We keep waiting for the right time. There isn't one. Tom propped himself up, voice rough. What's going on? Sam's jaw set. We're circling the real problem, and I'm tired of pretending. Mom, Dad, why do you think I stopped coming home? Why did you two start sleeping in separate rooms? Why do we only talk when someone's bleeding? George's face hardened. Sam. No, let her speak, Helen whispered, clutching Daisy's collar for strength. Sam's voice broke. It wasn't the fights or Tom's divorce or even money. It's the way we handle pain alone. We shut down, close ranks, pretend nothing happened. And when something finally does, like this, suddenly we're a family. Sorry, but I'm done faking. The room was so silent. Helen heard her own heart thudding. Tom blinked, stunned. George looked away, jaw working. Helen swallowed her pride. You're right, Sam. We don't talk. I don't talk. I hold everything in, thinking I'm protecting you, but really I'm just afraid. I was afraid every day your father would leave. Afraid you'd hate me for staying. Afraid Tom would be broken by the world the way I was. Sam's eyes shimmered. I don't hate you, Mom. But I need you to stop lying. To yourself. To us. George spoke softer than ever. I thought being a man meant holding it together. Paying the bills, swallowing the pain. But what did it get us? Tom cut through the tension with dry wit. A front row seat to a shark attack and a pitbull who's more family than half of us. Even Daisy gave a low, knowing bark. Helen smiled through tears. We survived a shark, but I'm not sure we can survive each other. Sam reached across the bed, squeezed Helen's hand. Then let's try. For real this time. No more hiding. A beat. The family, awkward and exposed, started to reach across the gap. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but honestly, maybe for the first time. Helen exhaled. The pain of truth was sharp, but also strangely clean. But just as they seemed to find their footing, an urgent knock shattered the moment. A hospital administrator strode in, file in hand, face grave. Mrs. Carter, may I speak with you in private? There's a matter about your insurance, and something else about the day of the attack. Helen's gut twisted. Some shadows aren't gone, they're just waiting for the lights to go out. What if your hero wasn't supposed to be there at all? In a world built on little lies, one hospital meeting threatens to unravel the story everyone wants to believe. What Helen learns now could destroy her family's fragile truce. Helen followed the administrator down a linoleum corridor, her heart thudding so loudly it drowned out the fluorescent buzz. She tried to remember the last time she'd been alone, truly alone with her own thoughts. Maybe before the kids were born. Maybe never. Inside the office, the administrator closed the door, face pinched with nerves. Mrs. Carter, I need to clarify a few things about the day of your son's accident. Helen nodded. Of course. Anything. The administrator hesitated, shuffling paperwork. The lifeguards' incident report doesn't match the hospital intake form. You told the paramedics Daisy was a trained service animal. Helen's mouth went dry. She remembered the panic, the shouting, the blood, the desperate need for them to let Daisy into the ambulance. She's not certified, but she's family. She saved my son's life. The administrator pressed on. That's not all. There's surveillance footage from the boardwalk. It shows you letting Daisy off leash, in violation of city ordinances. And, she paused, softer, the city's insurance provider is already asking questions. If it's ruled negligence, you could be liable for medical costs. Helen felt the room tilt. We did what we had to. Daisy is why Tom's alive. I believe you, Mrs. Carter, the woman said quietly. But the city sees it differently. And there's something else. We received an anonymous complaint. Someone claimed Daisy has a history of aggression. They want her quarantined, possibly put down. For a moment, Helen saw nothing but red. All the love and terror she felt for Daisy twisted into a single, animal howl of protest. No. She's not dangerous. She's our Daisy. The administrator's eyes softened. I know what she did, but the process is out of my hands. Animal control will want a statement from you and your family. And if there's any history. Helen remembered the neighbor's yappy terrier. The fight over the broken fence. The letter from animal control that she'd shredded out of spite. One little lie to the vet, and now it could cost Daisy everything. Outside, Helen heard Sam's voice raised in anger. George's barked reply. The family's fragile truce was already splintering. Helen's world narrowed to a single point. Would Daisy be punished for saving Tom's life? Or would the Carters lose everything, all for a rule they'd never thought would matter, until it did? She walked back down the hall, hands shaking, eyes blurry. At Tom's door she stopped, watching her family argue. Sam red-faced, George defiant, Tom too weary to fight. Daisy pressed flat under the bed, eyes shining with trust and fear. Helen realized. Surviving disaster didn't mean you got a miracle. Sometimes you just got more problems. She stepped inside, voice trembling but loud. There's something you all need to hear. And this time, I'm not hiding anything. Her family fell silent, every face turning toward her. But before she could begin, her phone buzzed. Animal control. The future clawing at the door. The Carters thought the hardest battle was behind them. They were wrong. The fight for Daisy's life would test everything they believed about family and about forgiveness. How far would you go to save the one who saved you? As the system sharpens its knives, the Carters must face their deepest fears and their darkest secrets if they hope to protect Daisy from a fate worse than the shark. Animal control arrived just after sunrise, moving with the clinical efficiency of people who have learned not to care too much. 2 officers, all uniforms and clipped voices, met Helen at the hospital entrance. Daisy's leash felt impossibly heavy in her hand. "We're here for the dog involved in yesterday's incident," said the older officer, his tone bland, eyes flicking past Helen to where Daisy wagged uncertainly at her side. "We need to take her for observation." Helen stood tall, but her insides quaked. "She's not a threat. She saved my son's life. She belongs with us." The younger officer, a woman with a lined face and surprisingly gentle eyes, crouched down and scratched Daisy behind the ears. "We know, ma'am, but we have to follow protocol. 3 days of quarantine, then a behavioral assessment. That's the law." The Carters gathered around, George stiff and bristling, Tom pale and furious even in his wheelchair, Sam silent but burning with a quiet, righteous rage. Tom wheeled forward, voice hoarse. "If Daisy hadn't been there, I'd be dead. She did more than any of you people ever could." The older officer flinched just a little. "It's not personal, son." "Maybe it should be," Sam snapped. "Maybe if any of you knew what family meant." George cut her off, his voice shaking with anger and something deeper, older. "Enough. Yelling won't help Daisy. We have to work the system, not fight it." Helen felt the old fear curling in her gut. She remembered the night Daisy arrived. Just a trembling pup in a cardboard box, abandoned on their porch after the neighbor's kid got bitten by a stray. George had wanted to call animal control even then. Helen had insisted. "She's ours now." That promise echoed now, cruel and sharp. She looked into Daisy's trusting eyes. "I'll get you home. I swear." The officers loaded Daisy into the van, ignoring Tom's tears and Sam's string of legal threats. The van's door slammed. The Carters stood frozen, watching the only real hero of their disaster disappear behind steel and glass. Inside, Tom raged. "If anything happens to her, I'll never forgive myself. Or you," he added, shooting a glare at George, whose own face was twisted with guilt and impotence. Helen tried to soothe Tom, but her words fell flat. Sam was already on her phone, searching for animal lawyers. George paced, muttering about the cost, about making it right. Helen wanted to scream. At the city, at her family, at the world for punishing a dog for doing what no one else had dared. That day the Carters barely spoke. The press camped outside, hungry for the next headline. "Hero dog faces execution?" Helen fielded calls from reporters and lawyers, each one twisting the knife a little deeper. But alone that night, Helen made a decision. She dug through the old drawer in the kitchen, pulling out every slip of paper. Vet records, city warnings, that letter she'd hidden years ago. She made a pot of coffee, steeling herself for war. If she had to turn her life inside out to save Daisy, so be it. As she packed her files and rehearsed her speech for animal control, Helen's heart finally stopped racing. She wasn't just fighting for Daisy. She was fighting for everything she tried and failed to protect. For the first time, the fear was gone. Only purpose remained. You think it's about saving a dog, but what the Carters uncover next will force them to confront who they really are. Tomorrow the real battle begins. What's a family secret worth, your reputation, your home, or the life of the one who saved you? As Helen walks into the hearing, she carries every lie and every hope the Carters have ever known. Not everyone will walk out the same. The morning of Daisy's hearing broke gray and raw, the kind of weather that seeps under your skin. Helen ironed her best blouse with trembling hands, rehearsing what to say and what not to say. The others moved around her in tight, anxious circles. George in his old suit, combing hair he didn't have. Tom stubbornly refusing pain meds, wanting to be sharp, wanting to fight. Sam dressed for battle, phone glued to her palm, voice clipped and precise as she lined up character witnesses. They drove to the city animal shelter in silence. It was a squat, ugly building behind a chain-link fence, already ringed by news vans and curious onlookers. Protesters with homemade signs, "Save Hero Daisy," mingled with those who saw only the word Pitbull. Helen gripped George's hand so hard he winced. Inside, the hearing room was cramped and overheated. A bored city attorney, 2 animal control officers, and a panel of 3 officials with the power to decide Daisy's fate. The Carters sat together, fragile but united. For now, the city attorney began. He recited ordinances and fines, the dangerous breed clause, Daisy's previous complaint. The facts fell like hammers. Daisy off-leash, neighbor's terrier, the old animal control warning. Helen could feel the panel's sympathy shrinking with every word. Then it was Helen's turn. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. "We broke the rules. We know. But Daisy isn't dangerous. She's family. She did what no one else could. She saved my son from a shark. Every scar on Tom's leg is proof." The room was silent, all eyes fixed on her. Sam jumped in, her voice slicing through the doubt. "This is what pit bulls are for, they protect. Daisy has never attacked a person. She's never bitten anyone. She's our hero." Tom's turn came. He rolled up his pant leg, exposing the mangled, healing flesh. "If she's dangerous, then I'd rather be in danger. Because without Daisy, I wouldn't be here at all." Even George spoke up, breaking through his usual gruffness. "You want to punish someone? Punish me. I let her off the leash. I signed the papers I didn't read. But you don't punish a hero for being brave." The officials asked questions, poked holes, reminded them about laws. But it was the city attorney who lobbed the real grenade. "Mrs. Carter, can you explain why you hid the prior warning from animal control? Or why your neighbor filed a sworn affidavit stating Daisy bit her dog? That's perjury." Helen's breath caught. The secret she tried to bury was out, dragged under fluorescent lights. Sam squeezed Helen's shoulder. "Tell the truth, Mom." Helen closed her eyes, then opened them, voice barely above a whisper. "I was scared. I thought if anyone found out, Daisy would be taken. I thought I was protecting my family. I'm sorry. It was raw, ugly, real." The board conferred. 5 minutes that felt like a lifetime. Finally, the chairwoman looked up. "We'll deliberate further. For now, Daisy will remain in quarantine. We'll contact you with a decision." Outside, the crowd pressed close, hoping for a happy ending. Helen wasn't sure she believed in those anymore. The Carters drove home, silent, wounded but together. Sam leaned her head on Tom's shoulder. George squeezed Helen's hand and didn't let go. But that night a letter arrived, a legal notice. The neighbor had filed a civil suit, demanding damages for trauma and endangerment. The Carters' fight had only just begun. Just when you think the worst is over, the past comes knocking again. The Carters must decide, will they finally stand together? Or will old betrayals tear them apart for good? When justice turns into a witch hunt, who stands with you? The Carters are cornered by neighbors, the law, and their own past mistakes. But tonight, a final act of loyalty will change everything they thought they knew about forgiveness. The lawsuit hit the family like a second wave. Helen read the complaint over black coffee at 3 a.m., the legal jargon blurring into a smear of fear and fury. Trauma, endangerment, emotional distress, it was all there, weighted with dollar signs. The neighbor, Mrs. Harkness, wanted Daisy put down and the Carters' insurance to pay for therapy sessions, fencing, even a new puppy. George fumed, pacing the kitchen until sunrise. "They're going to bleed us dry. Over a dog fight that lasted 3 seconds. Tom just stared at his bandaged leg, the scars beginning to itch. "If Daisy's put down, I'm done. I'm serious, Mom." Sam, in full battle mode, called every lawyer in town, making lists and snapping orders. We fight. We fight harder than ever. But Helen's courage, after days of adrenaline and sorrow, felt like tissue paper. Guilt gnawed her. Had she brought this on them all, trying to hide the past? Was Daisy truly innocent, or just lucky until now? The family lawyer, a tired man in a cheap suit, sat with them that afternoon. "It's ugly," he admitted. "You can win in court, but you'll lose in the court of public opinion. The city doesn't like bad press. Neither do juries." "Can Daisy testify?" Tom joked, earning a watery laugh. The lawyer looked at Helen. "Do you want a settlement? Apologize, pay, and Daisy gets a warning but no dangerous animal label. But if you push for a trial, it's risky." The room simmered with anger and helplessness. Sam refused. "No deals. Daisy did nothing wrong. And neither did we." Helen, exhausted, finally snapped. "What if it's not about right or wrong? What if it's just about losing less?" For once, George spoke gently. "You're not alone, Helen. We're in this together, whatever you decide." The next day, a city official brought news. The panel would allow Daisy a supervised behavioral exam, the final test. If she passed, she'd go home. If not, the official didn't finish the sentence. Helen spent the night with Daisy at the shelter, her hand curled in soft fur, whispering all the apologies and promises she'd never made before. "You saved us. Now I have to save you." The test was tense, a parade of strange people and loud noises. Daisy, trembling at first, rallied, nuzzling, obeying, licking the hands of city staff. When a toddler tripped and shrieked, Daisy only whined and pressed herself to the ground. Helen's tears would not stop. She clung to every moment, praying to whatever would listen. The panel watched, took notes, and left. Helen sat on the bench outside, waiting for the verdict with her heart beating out of time. Tom arrived in his wheelchair, Sam and George on either side. "Whatever happens," Tom said, "Daisy's family." The shelter door opened. The official's face was unreadable. "You can take her home. On probation. With conditions." Helen nearly collapsed with relief. They all crowded around Daisy, laughing, crying, promising to never take her for granted again. But as they left, Mrs. Harkness stood in her yard, arms folded, eyes like ice. "You got lucky," she spat. "Next time you won't." Helen met her gaze. "We don't need luck. We have each other." But as they drove away, Helen knew the wounds would take longer to heal than any bite. Family scars run deep, but sometimes they remind you where your strength really lives. You think you've heard it all, but one last confession will test the Carters' new bond. What Helen reveals at home will make you question everything about loyalty and love. What happens after the storm, when survival isn't enough? The Carters are finally together, but one last truth will shake their foundation and offer a second chance at forgiveness they never thought possible. The house felt unfamiliar, as if re-entering after a war. Sunlight streamed across the living room floor, highlighting paw prints and crumbs, the detritus of ordinary chaos. Daisy bounded from room to room, free at last, her tail painting arcs of joy. Tom trailed after her, his limp pronounced but his face brighter than it had been in weeks. Helen sat at the kitchen table, the court documents stacked beside her, a mug cooling untouched in her hands. Across from her, George scrolled through his phone in silence. Sam leaned against the counter, half listening, eyes darting between her mother and her brother as if waiting for an aftershock. For a while there was peace, quiet, real, almost fragile. The Carters made tea, Daisy sprawled beneath the table, and Tom read aloud letters of support from strangers who'd seen their story on TV. For a moment, Helen let herself believe this could be enough. But as dusk settled, a heaviness returned. Helen gathered her family in the living room. "There's something I need to say," she began, voice soft but unwavering. "I've carried a secret for years, a small thing, but it grew with every lie, every time I thought I was protecting us." George looked up, wary. Sam's expression darkened, but Tom just nodded, as if he'd known all along that this story wasn't finished. Helen took a breath. Daisy wasn't just an accident on our porch. The day I found her, I knew whose dog she really was. She belonged to the neighbor, the one who called animal control. She ran away because she was afraid, not because she was dangerous. I saw the way she flinched at loud voices, how she always hid when someone got angry. Tom stared, speechless. George's jaw worked, but nothing came out. I lied, Helen went on. When the neighbor came asking, I said I hadn't seen her. I thought I was saving a dog, but maybe I was just running from my own mistakes. And I let you all believe Daisy was ours, when really she was just lost and looking for someone to trust. A deep, aching silence filled the room. Sam was the first to speak. Why now, Mom? Helen's hands trembled. Because I'm tired of hiding. Because I saw what nearly losing Daisy did to us, to me. Family isn't about blood or paperwork or the stories we tell to make ourselves look good. It's about what we're willing to risk for each other. And for the truth. Tom wiped his eyes, breaking into a smile. She chose us, Mom. That's all that matters. George finally found his voice. You should have told us. But thank you. For keeping us together, even if it was messy. Daisy leapt into Helen's lap, as if she understood every word. They laughed, they cried, and for the first time in years nothing was left unsaid. The wounds, old and new, began to knit, not because the Carters were perfect, but because they finally let themselves be real. Later, as Helen watched her family drift into easy conversation, she realized the hardest storms sometimes bring the clearest skies. Survival, she thought, is only the beginning. The rest is choosing each other over and over again. In the end, a shark wasn't the thing that threatened the Carters. It was fear and secrets and pride. And the one who saved them all had 4 legs and a heart bigger than the ocean.